Alright guys, what's going on? I am sitting here in New York and it's a really nice day. I want to say it's the first day of spring because it feels like that, but it's going to be pretty cold soon. So anyway, yeah, I'm getting ready to go to Europe tomorrow. Going to be playing some shows over in London. We're going to be in Paris too. And so yeah, I've been making a lot of flashcards to study on the plane. And yeah, otherwise things are going well. I've been learning some grammar. So that's been really cool and interesting. And I feel like I'm about to get over a kind of a plateau here, and I'm going to start being able to advance really quickly because, you know, up to this point I've been learning just a bunch of words by themselves, and Japanese has a really steep learning curve at the beginning because if you want to learn to read and write and all that stuff, that takes a lot of work before you can really get going and actually start having conversations. So I feel like I'm on the cusp of getting over this really steep learning curve, and then it's going to be, I'm going to have a period of really fast progress is what I'm feeling is happening. I already have all of this vocabulary learned, and so once I learn just a handful of these really common structures, like for how to conjugate verbs and stuff, I can start applying those structures to every single word that I know, and there's quite a few of them. So grammar, in this sense, allows me to multiply what I can say, whereas vocabulary is more like addition. You know, if I keep learning new words, I can say one more thing with each word that I learn. If I learn a new piece of grammar, I can use that with every word that I know. So anyway, it's fun and things are going well. Today I wanted to answer some of your questions that have come up on YouTube, and maybe we'll get into some Reddit questions too. So we're going to cover a lot of ground today and a lot of different topics. So let's dive in. First question, Maxim Sharov asks, as I understand you're studying on your own, right? What are you going to do with grammar? Will you go to classes or will you ask someone to explain it to you? So first of all, I'm not planning on taking any classes. My only real experience taking language classes was a long time ago. In high school, I took Spanish for 3 years. But at the end of it, I couldn't really speak any Spanish at all. And so the whole experience as a language learning endeavor didn't really have very good results. Even though I had fun, I liked the class, and I actually had a good teacher, but I didn't really learn anything there just because that classroom setting, at least in the way that the language was taught at my school, and many other schools in the US are like this, at least the way they're taught is not really the best way to learn a language. So it wasn't until, I don't know, 10 years later when I started learning how to learn languages on my own, researching all this stuff online, how people were doing it. That's when I really started to make progress. So anyway, I'm not going to be taking any classes. Yeah, nothing against classes, but I find for me they don't really work as effectively because I like to move at my own pace. I like to customize what I'm learning, and yeah, so for the last couple of languages I haven't used any classes at all, and it's worked really well. So I'm just going to do that. But for things like grammar, yes, I will have to get some explanations for sure. And so this is actually a really good thing to talk about now because I just started grammar like in the last week or two. So for grammar, I'm starting by using some free online resources, things like Take Him's grammar guide, and what else? Just some basic phrases like greetings and, you know, how are you, that kind of easy stuff that you should know. And yeah, I think that's it for online resources. And then the big thing that I've been doing for grammar is working with italki tutors and So I've had a couple of these lessons now where we don't actually speak in Japanese. This is not conversation practice, but these tutors have been helping me translate sentences and explain grammar and explain how all the words work. And at the same time, I'm able to get a whole lot of personal sentences that are really relevant to me and how I'm gonna use Japanese. So that's been extremely useful. Specifically, what I'm doing is going into class with generally around 15 or 20 sentences prepared, things that I want to learn how to say in Japanese. Like, I don't know, this week we did, I'm going to London, we are going to play a concert, we played a concert yesterday, I play the drums, I'm a musician, I'm on tour with a band, so all that kind of stuff. This is stuff that I'm going to end up talking about a lot, and it also allows me to learn the grammar. So if I have sentences like, we played a concert yesterday and we will play a concert tomorrow, by having some similar sentences with little differences, it's really easy to understand how the grammar works just by comparing things and reusing material. So that's what I've been doing so far. In the future, I definitely plan to use some actual, like, real physical textbooks, but I'll get to that maybe next month or the one after. We'll see. So, hope that answers your question. Next, King Helian the 18th asks, is there a reason why you started with Katakana first? And he's talking about the first day of learning Japanese, where I started learning Katakana before Hiragana. And the answer is no, not really. It just happened to be that way in the Anki deck that I used, the pronunciation trainer that I was using. I honestly don't think it really matters which one you do first. A lot of people seem to just assume that you would start with Hiragana because it's you're going to use it a lot more in Japanese, but I don't think it matters. And personally, I found the experience really helpful to start with Katakana, and the reason for that was that we could use English, well, yeah. Personally, I found it really helpful to start with Katakana, and I would actually recommend that if you're trying to decide what to do. And the reason is that you can use foreign words, you can use like English, like Japanese-ified English words as examples for those spellings, and that kind of acted as a nice like introduction to Japanese that was a little bit easier because I was familiar with those words. So I liked starting with Katakana first. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, but I did find it easier to do it that way. I actually struggled a little bit more and a little bit longer with Hiragana just because all of the example words were in Japanese for that, and I didn't know any Japanese at the time. So yeah, for me it was easier to start with Englishy kind of words in Katakana. Brencho asks, I just bought the first 625 word list. Do I have to create 625 flashcards in Anki? If so, which model deck should I use to create them? Yes, you do. And I know that this turns a lot of people off. They don't want to make their own flashcards. It sounds hard and it is more work, but for me it's worth it. So I don't think it would be more efficient for me personally to use a pre-made vocabulary deck, mainly because most flashcard decks made by other people are not really made in the same way that I would want them made. So for me, that means I want a lot of images, recordings. I want the kanji split up in a certain way into different radicals and component pieces. And also, yeah, and the big one is that I'm trying to not use any English anywhere, which is really hard to find in other flashcards. You kind of just have to make that on your own. So anyway, yes, you do have to make flashcards, but in my experience, the process of making the flashcards is also a huge part of the learning process. That's when you kind of play around with and break down the language, and you actually learn a lot while you do that process. And when you find your own image on Google and you kind of make a connection to that image in your head and a story with that sentence or whatever it might be, you're going to remember that stuff a lot better. So for me, it's more effective to choose my own content and make my own flashcards than to just like do some random deck that I found on the internet. So yes, you do have to make your own flashcards if you're working from that list, but I think it's well worth the time. As far as the model deck, the one you should use is from the Kanji Signatures blog post. If you just Google Kanji Signatures, Japanese model deck, Fluent Forever, something like that, it should come up. But that's the newest one. There was like another 1 or 2 model decks that went up before that, but then they made some changes to it afterwards. So that would be the one to grab. Next, Emma So asks, do you worry at all about pitch accent when you learn vocabulary? Or do you just try and mimic the audio as closely as possible so that you learn it naturally, in quotes? Personally, I do worry about pitch accent, and I'll actually mark myself wrong on a flashcard if I get the pitch accent wrong. Now, pitch accent is a little bit tricky because the pitch accent for a word on its own might be different from its pitch accent within the context of a phrase or a sentence. Sometimes that changes, so you have to watch out for that. But I do try and use the correct pitch accent. And in fact, last night I had a pronunciation lesson on italki, and the teacher said he was really appreciative of the fact that I was paying attention to pitch accent and doing it accurately, because he said it's much easier to listen to, it sounds nicer, it's much more comfortable for somebody who's Japanese to listen to the correct intonation. And you know, honestly, the same thing goes for English or any other language. If somebody uses a really weird pitch scheme, it sounds bizarre. We do use pitch to change the meaning of things in English too. So it's not that this is a whole new bizarre concept. I mean, it's a little foreign, but it's just a different way of doing something that you kind of already do in your own language. So I would say try and pay attention to it. As far as if I just try and learn it naturally, or if I really intellectually know where all the pitches are, I think that a little bit of both is really helpful. You could try and just mimic it and get as close as you can naturally without really trying to understand intellectually what's happening, but I think both things are helpful. The intellectual knowledge of, okay, this word is supposed to be low, high, 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 is really helpful. But you should also rely on your ear and your natural instincts too, because on paper it's only 2 pitches, high and low, but when they actually speak, it's a little bit wishy-washy, where it's more like there's 2 ranges and the notes can kind of float around in between there. If you listen to it literally, like as a musician, like listening to the melody of it, they'll actually use some different pitches, but within the high range or within the low range. So it took me a little bit to get used to that, because I was saying, well, no, this is supposed to be high, low, low, and I'm hearing like da da da, like low, high, a little bit lower, but you know, they just counted that as low, high, high, even though the last 2 notes are a little bit different if you want to be picky about it. So use both. I think try and mimic it and try and also understand it, because both are helpful. Next, Aga Zafar Ali asks, are you staying in Japan? And if yes, which language school are you going to? Unfortunately, I'm not staying in Japan. I'm staying in New York and also traveling a lot this year, but I do hope to get to Japan very soon, definitely this year at some point. ZDC21 asks, how did you study the first 100 kanji radicals? I made a video about this. Excuse me. For that, you can look at my video about kanji radicals. That'll tell you everything you need to know about that. Will Henry says, really cool channel, man. I was confused by your approach for learning the most common 1,000 words. What's your method for these cards you're creating in Anki? Sentences, words, definition, English, something else? Thanks. So actually this is probably pretty well answered by the last video I made about how I'm making flashcards. But yeah, the brief summary would be I learned the first, I don't know, 300 maybe words just by themselves using pictures. So I didn't have any English, but these were all simple words that I could understand just using a picture. Then I started to mix in a little bit of grammar, and that's where I'm at now. So I'm still learning some words with pictures, but I'm moving more and more towards using sentences to learn these words, and I'm learning more grammar type things as well. Once you finish doing those picture words and you start getting to words that you can't really like use a picture for, like more abstract things, then the best way to do it that I'm aware of is to use fill in the blank sentences, and that way you also don't have to translate anything, and you can use stuff in context in Japanese. So you would say like, I want to learn Spanish because I want to go to Spain, and if you want to learn the word because, then on your flashcard, I want to learn Spanish blank, I want to go to Spain, and then because is the thing that fits in that blank space. Once you finish those first words, you can use fill in the blank sentence flashcards for pretty much everything else. Next, we have a question, and I cut off the username here. I'll try and add that back in. But they ask, are you planning on using a textbook like Genki or Minna No Nihongo? These two are highly recommended over at the Reddit Japanese forum. Yes, I do plan on using textbooks, definitely Genki. Another one that's been highly recommended is Tobira, and also, yes, I've seen that Minna no Nihongo recommended several times too. So I'm probably going to start with Genki, and then we'll see what happens after that. They no Nihongo asks, how much money are you willing to spend on learning? My answer is as little as possible. I do not want or need to spend a lot of money to learn a language. I'm trying to keep my expenses to a minimum. I mean, now that I'm almost done with the first 625 words, I'm going to learn the rest of the words from like free online lists. So, you know, not much expense there. Textbooks, I probably will actually try and check out from the library so I don't have to pay anything. Yeah, not taking any classes. I mean, that's about it. My expenses will be probably mostly in italki tutoring, which is not expensive. So yeah, you can find tutors for like $6 to $8 an hour over there, and that's an extremely good use of your time. So I would say after the first $50 I spend, it's probably going to be mostly italki expenses after that. But even then, it's still pretty cheap. Aomidoro asks, how long are you going to wait before you start grammar? And I guess we already touched on this a little bit because I've already started learning grammar. So, you know, the way that I learned Japanese, I learned a bunch of words first with pictures and then started learning grammar. That's kind of how I did it for French and Italian. But with Norwegian, which was the third language that I learned, I actually did all of that from the beginning. So like sentences, grammar, words, everything from the very start. And I had a tutor on italki help me just translate things and speak with me. So with Norwegian though, it was a lot easier to hit the ground running and start with grammar at the very beginning because it's very similar to English. The grammar is really, really simple. With Japanese, it was a little bit more intimidating and overwhelming at the beginning because I had to learn the writing systems, and also the grammar is pretty different from English. So it was a lot, I felt at the time, to dive straight into sentences. But yeah, it can be done. but I wouldn't recommend starting with grammar right away necessarily if you don't have experience learning languages before, because that's kind of a lot to take on, is to like learn a language and learn how to learn the language at the same time, and have it be a really difficult language like Japanese. And not that Japanese is more difficult per se, but there's definitely a lot more stuff you have to learn in Japanese to get to a similar level if you're an English speaker. Anyway, that should answer the question. I've already started grammar. And that's it, so I hope that was helpful. And I'm off to Europe tomorrow, and we're coming up on the 2-month mark, and so I'll have another progress video coming out for that. And I think that's it for now. So thanks for watching, good luck, and see ya next time. Bye.